In this video, you will learn how to construct a food web using common organisms that you can find in your backyard, park, or school grounds. As you build your food web, pay close attention to the behaviors and activity of your specimens, for it is these seemingly simple activities that provide essential ecosystem services that make all life on Earth, including human life, possible. A few key things to remember. A food web is made of many smaller food chains. Every food chain must start with a producer, an organism that makes its own food. All plants are producers, as well as other organisms that we'll learn as we go through the class. Also keep in mind that food chains show the energy transfer between organisms. To represent this, we use an arrow to show how energy is transferred from one organism to the next. The arrow always points in the direction of energy flow. I took this picture in a small patch of clover in between the buildings here at PCC. Once you locate a cool producer, such as these flowering clover plants, the herbivores that feed on your producers will soon show themselves. Here we have a European honeybee feeding on a clover flower. Worker honeybees collect pollen and nectar from flowers and use it to feed themselves, their young, and other bees that never leave the hive. They also use it to build and repair their hives. As the honeybee feeds on the clover flower, energy is transferred from the clover to the bee. So here, we draw our arrow from the clover to the honeybee. As bees fly from one flower to the next, they transfer pollen from each flower, thus pollinating or fertilizing the flower. Without this service, flowering plants could not reproduce. This essential ecosystem service provides humans with much of our food. Over 70% of our crops rely on pollination from European honeybees. Without these bees, most of our fruits and vegetables could not be grown. As you will learn in this unit, honeybees are in trouble. Their populations are rapidly declining, and scientists aren't sure why. European honeybees were purposefully brought to the United States by European colonists for the pollination of crops. The bumblebee shown in this picture, however, is native to North America. Bumblebees will feed on and pollinate many of the same plants as honeybees, but typically bumblebees do not see our crops as a food source, since many of our crops are also not native. However, with the declining honeybee population, farmers and scientists are working to find ways to utilize bumblebees as commercial pollinators, attempting to teach them to feed on and pollinate our crops. The bumblebee is another herbivore we can use in our food web. Here, energy goes from the clover to the bumblebee. As you will also learn in this unit, the relationship between a flowering plant and its pollinator is known as mutualism. Both the plant and the bee benefit from the relationship. The bee benefits because it gets food. The plant benefits because it gets to reproduce. I found this butterfly feeding in the same patch of clover. I did not know what specific kind it was, so I Googled white gray butterfly with orange patches. I quickly found its picture and then learned that this butterfly is commonly known as an Ackerman blue butterfly. These butterflies are being highly researched due to their unusual relationship with ants. The caterpillars and the butterflies of this family secrete a pheromone that allows them to communicate and work with ants. The ants will protect the caterpillar from predators while it feeds on leaves, and the caterpillar secretes a honey-like substance as food for the ants. This is another great example of mutualism. It also reveals the amazing complexity of our ecosystem. Later in the day, I took this picture of common blackbirds hunting in the same clover patch. The birds eat the pollinators that come to these flowers, as well as other insects and worms in the soil. They will also eat seeds, nuts, and fruits. Thus, these blackbirds and most songbirds are omnivores because they eat both plants and animals. The biodiversity found in this small patch of clover reveals the extreme importance of this plant. Clover is a major source of food for many of our vital pollinators, yet most of us consider it a weed. We use pesticides and other methods to try to rid our yards of weeds and then bring in often non-native grasses to achieve what we consider to be a great lawn. This destruction of vital native plants is threatening all of our pollinators, which in turn threatens our own ability to produce food. Biologically, a beautiful yard is one that promotes biodiversity. Consider leaving parts of your yard natural, allowing it to fill in with clover, dandelions, and other vital native plants. In this picture, taken in my front yard, we can see 3 different insects on this dandelion. You might then assume that these insects are pollinators, but closer investigation and research reveals that most wasps are carnivores, feeding on other small insects. Thus, the wasp in this picture might actually be hunting the other insects we see on this flower. However, wasps will sometimes drink nectar from flowers, since it is somewhat of a free food source. Thus, our wasp is best classified as an omnivore. Larger wasps will prey on honeybees, small bumblebees, and even spiders, often stinging and paralyzing them and feeding them to their young. Here we have a beautiful orb weaver spider that I watched spin a web on the rose bush in my front yard. Orb weavers are so named because they spin beautiful orb-shaped webs. They are not dangerous to people, as most spiders are not, and they are extremely important in keeping insect populations under control. Here you can see that this Hentz's orb weaver has already captured an insect and wrapped it in a blanket of silk. Spiders feed on insects only and are thus strict carnivores. This spider would happily eat any of our 3 herbivores. This is Bufo americanus, the American toad, one of the most common amphibians in North America. Toads are also strict carnivores. They eat insects and arachnids such as spiders. They will even eat other frogs and smaller amphibians. During the day, toads can be found in cool, shady hideouts. I found this one under the bricks of my front plant bed. Toads are nocturnal, so if you wait till nightfall, they will be abundant. This toad would happily eat our honeybee, bumblebee, butterfly, and spider. I've picked up and played with toads most of my life. It wasn't until college that I learned toads are actually very poisonous. The gland behind the eye, shown here, releases a toxic milky white liquid that can be fatal if ingested. But in all my handling of toads, we kept them as pets, put them in our pool to watch them swim, and even raced them with other kids in the neighborhood, I never once saw this substance. It is most commonly threatening to dogs and cats who catch the toads in their mouths and then bite down. This causes the toad to release its toxin. Toad poisoning in dogs and cats is common. This amazing picture of a dragonfly eating an insect was taken from inside the car when it landed on the windshield. Many people do not know that dragonflies are carnivores. As the name dragonfly suggests, these beautiful aerial acrobats are masters of the sky. Dragonflies feed on gnats, mosquitoes, yellow flies, houseflies, butterflies, and even bees. This gives them an extremely important ecological role as a major population control agent for these insects. Growing up on our farm, we were always happy to have dragonflies around. They would follow us and even ride on our shoulders, using us as bait to catch and devour mosquitoes and yellow flies that would come to feed on us. When dragonflies are about, you can hold up your arm and extend a finger like a branch, and they will likely land on you, giving you a close-up view of this amazing predator. Let's add the dragonfly to our food web. This dragonfly would happily eat any one of our herbivores, so we draw an arrow from each herbivore to the dragonfly. But dragonflies are not usually at the top of the food chain. They are often preyed upon by fish, toads, frogs, birds, and bats. Our American toad would gladly eat this dragonfly, as would our blackbirds. So we draw our arrows from the dragonfly to the toad, and from the dragonfly to the blackbirds. Ants are some of nature's most successful and most abundant scavengers. Scavengers are similar to omnivores because they will eat both plant and animal material, but unlike omnivores, scavengers will feed on animals that are already dead. In this picture, we have red imported fire ants scavenging on the corpse of a paper wasp. The red imported fire ant, or Riffa, is originally from South America. It is not native to this area and has no natural predators. As you will learn in this unit, red imported fire ants are an excellent example of an invasive species. These ants are invasive because they outcompete and frequently eliminate native ant populations. They also act as predators and often attack the eggs and young of many bird and reptile species. As with most invasive species, these ants have also caused widespread economic losses. We spend approximately $2 billion in the U.S. each year on the treatment and eradication of fire ants. In order to specify ants as scavengers on our food web, we need to show that a transfer of energy occurred after death. In this picture, the fire ants are feeding on the paper wasp after it has died, so we draw an arrow from the wasp to the ants to show this transfer of energy. Then we place an X on the arrow. This indicates that the energy transferred occurred after the death of the paper wasp. The same would happen when any of the other animals in our food web died. Here we have an eastern box turtle munching on a mushroom. The eastern box turtle is North Carolina's state reptile, but many people do not know that the eastern box turtle is actually a tortoise, not a turtle. The tortoise is terrestrial and lives completely on land. It only goes to the water to drink. Eastern box turtles, or tortoises, are not good swimmers, as their feet are not webbed and their shells are not streamlined like water turtles. Instead, their large feet are adapted to walking and digging on the forest floor. They dig sleeping and nesting dens under leaf litter. They also dig to find food. The eastern box turtle is an omnivore. They eat a variety of insects, snails, slugs, spiders, and worms, but they also eat plant material, including fruit, berries, flowers, and grasses. They even eat fungi, as we see in this picture. The mushroom shown in this picture acts as both a food source and as a decomposer. As we will learn, the mushroom is just the reproductive portion of the fungus. Most of the fungus is underground and out of view. Most fungi are decomposers that break down decaying material and recycle nutrients back into the soil. If this tortoise died, fungi and bacteria would work to decompose its remains and recycle its nutrients back into the soil. In fact, when any one of our food web specimens dies, decomposers will break it down and recycle its nutrients. This is why decomposers are known as Mother Nature's recyclers and are arguably the most important part of every food chain. Without decomposers, nutrients could not be recycled and reused within ecosystems, and the cycle of food webs would cease to exist, resulting in a collapse of all life on the planet. The best way to represent decomposers in a food web is by drawing one large arrow from the entire food web to your decomposers. This shows that all living organisms will eventually die and their energy will be transferred to a decomposer. Decomposers get energy from every organism in the food web. When setting up your food web, work from the bottom up. Remember, all food chains must start with a producer, so our producers are at the bottom of the food chain. Next, we have the herbivores, which feed on and obtain energy from our producers. Then we bring in our carnivores and omnivores in the order that makes sense based on your specimens. Remember, decomposers get energy from every living thing in the food web, so we can draw one large arrow from the entire food web to our decomposers. Once you have your specimens arranged correctly, add your arrows to show the transfer of energy from one specimen to the next. Remember, the arrow always points in the direction of energy flow. Energy flows from producers to herbivores to carnivores and so on. Be sure to consider all possible relationships between your specimens and show this with your arrows. For example, we classified our eastern box turtle as an omnivore because it feeds on both plants and animals. So we need to make sure this is shown in our food web. Here, we draw arrows from some of our producers, herbivores, carnivores, and even our decomposer to the eastern box turtle, representing the diverse diet of this animal. You would do the same if you used yourself as an omnivore in your food web. Also, remember to identify scavengers in your food web by placing an X through the arrows that show an energy transfer occurred after death. Here, we show that ants can obtain energy from our toad, but this transfer of energy would likely occur only after the toad's death. So we place an X on the arrow going from the toad to the ants. Now it's your turn. Go out and explore your environment and the amazing biodiversity around you. As you build your food web, you will begin to see that everything is connected. I can't wait to see what you discover. Have fun!